You probably have some or the other memory related to an airport, right? Either bidding somebody a sad goodbye, or coming home to family after a trip, or the excitement of going on a new trip. But then, have you ever wondered how the business of airports actually works? In this video, we will explain to you all about it. How do airports operate? Do airports generate revenue? Are they profitable? Everything around an airport. Cool. Before we get to that, we have a very nice offer that we are running for our YouTube viewers that I'll talk about later in the video. So running an airport is complex and challenging. Now, for most countries, airports are actually part of their strategic assets. So governments basically build and maintain the airports. But if we look at developed countries like the US or UK, or even certain developing countries like India, certain airports in these countries are actually run by private organizations. And if private organizations are running the business, you know that they will look for profits or try to maximize profits. So for our discussion today, to dissect an airport, we will use Heathrow Airport's financials. London's Heathrow Airport is one of the largest airports in the world that is wholly owned by a private entity. And the data is very, very interesting. In 2021, 19.4 million passengers traveled through Heathrow. This was during COVID, right? But before COVID, almost 80.9 million passengers traveled through this airport. Heathrow is the world's second most busiest airport by international passenger traffic and the seventh busiest airport in the world if you consider both international and domestic passenger traffic. One more interesting statistic is that at its peak, Heathrow managed more than 200,000 passengers daily. That's a massive amount of people going through the airport on a daily basis. Next, now let's look at what are the services that Heathrow as an airport provides, because that's how they make their money, right? So first, Heathrow provides aircrafts with a bunch of different services. One is a runway for landing, hangars for maintenance, and fuel services. Along with that, they also provide routing services through their air traffic controllers. These facilities are used by passenger carrying aircrafts, the likes of in Lufthansa, American Airlines, or even Air India, right? And cargo airlines, the likes of FedEx Express and UPS Airlines. Now, Heathrow, through these services, generated $2.1 billion in revenue in 2019 and $659 million in 2021. Of course, as you'd expect, the revenue that Heathrow got from airlines dipped between 2019 to 2021 because of COVID. Heathrow also generates revenue through another stream, which is through passenger services. So earlier you had aircraft services, now you have passenger services, and this they term as their retail segment. Now this segment is very important for any airport because airports, they provide their premises to restaurants, cab services, and retail shops who in turn serve the passengers, and airports charge these companies to set up shop within their premises. Heathrow generated $1.4 billion in 2019 from this revenue segment and $825 million in 2021 through this retail segment that we saw. Now, despite having 75% less passenger traffic, the dip in retail revenue is only 40%. This means that at a passenger level, Heathrow managed to make much more money during COVID than they were making previously. We'll talk more about this in a moment. Now, if airports manage heavy passenger traffic, they must also be incurring huge costs, right, to keep maintaining the airport at all points in time. That's right. In 2019, before the pandemic, Heathrow spent $2.3 billion and spent $2.1 billion in 2021 during the pandemic. The costs have not really changed drastically before and after COVID. Compared to 2019, the costs were reduced by about 9% in 2021. But passenger traffic declined by 75%. So this means that for an airport business, irrespective of the passenger traffic, the airport has to incur certain costs, and those are fixed costs. If we look at how these costs are split, so 20% is spent to pay Heathrow's more than 5,000 employees' salaries, and another 60% is spent on maintaining the airport and paying utility bills like electricity, for example. The rest 10% of the cost is depreciation, which is basically a non-cash expense. Alright, so now we understand, now that we've looked at both revenue and costs, in 2019, Heathrow actually made $1.2 billion in operating profits. But in 2021, because of the lower traffic of passengers, they made an operating loss of $700 million. And this leads us to the next question, right? Like, what are the avenues through which an airport can keep growing their revenue to be able to cover costs and keep generating profits. The first avenue that they can look at is, naturally, you get more aircrafts going through the airport, right? But every airport has a maximum capacity that they can serve. Heathrow can serve little over 650 one-way aircraft movements daily, and they're already operating at a 99% capacity. But despite this, there is a constant increase in the revenue from aircraft handling services at Heathrow. How did that happen? Heathrow is the only hub airport in the UK. This means that if you want to fly, let's say, to New York from Mumbai and your layover is in the UK, then it will only be at the Heathrow Airport. So hub airports actually attract long-haul flights, which means that passengers arriving in the airport keep increasing, and thus that increases the number of flights and the flight revenue that they can generate. They can keep increasing prices. On average, Heathrow charges close to $10,000 for landing and takeoff to an airline. Now, if the aircraft is small and carries fewer passengers, then using Heathrow services will be costly for the airline because you don't have those many passengers to spread your cost, right? Heathrow also wants to attract only long-haul flights because they want passengers who spend more time at the airport, and thus they can generate income from the retail services that they're providing to these airports. Heathrow also wants to attract only long-haul flights because they want more passengers who spend time at the airport, and that will help generate more revenue from the retail segment for them, right? No wonder the most popular destinations from Heathrow are New York, Dubai, Dublin, Amsterdam and Hong Kong, all long-haul flights. But then what about the short-haul and domestic flights? Like, where do they land? Well, Heathrow doesn't really care. They charge more for these flights so that they are deterred from using the airport for landing or departure. They are essentially forcing the airlines to use other smaller airports that are in the country operated by the government who are not optimizing for profits. London has 5 smaller airports compared to Heathrow, and they serve these short haul and domestic flights. This is also the reason why every airport cannot be a profit making enterprise. Otherwise, you will never be able to sustain smaller domestic flights. Alright, before we dive into the next section, here's a special offer that I mentioned in the beginning. The first 50 people that use the link in the video description to fund their vested account will get a one-time $20 bonus upon funding. This offer is something that's not available anywhere else, so make sure to check out the link in the description to avail the offer. Alright, so now looking at the passenger side of things, airports deal with 2 types of passengers: the arriving passenger and the departing passenger. The arriving passengers don't tend to spend too much time at the airport. Naturally, right? Because arriving passengers generally go through customs, immigrations, and leave the airport quickly without buying any kind of the services that are provided there. Similar is the case for domestic passengers as well. They're going in and going out very quickly. On the other hand, connecting and departing passengers typically spend much more time at the airport. They spend time in restaurants, retail shops, looking around as they're waiting for the flight. And that is why, in the best interest of the airport, to ensure, let's say, for example, the check-in and the transfers are done as fast as possible so that passengers get a lot more time to shop. So interesting, right? Heathrow earned almost $11 per passenger through their retail operations in 2019. This shot up to $14 per passenger in 2021. For airports, they have to monetize every second the passenger spends at the airport because that's how they're earning their revenue, right? So let's break this retail revenue down even further. For Heathrow, this consists of 5 components. First is concession fees from retail stores, car parking and advertising is the second, rental income for the space provided for warehouses, lounges is the third, baggage handling, passenger check-in services is the fourth, and the Heathrow Express Rail service is the fifth. If you look at all of these 5 carefully, then you'll see that certain spending is essential, like using the rail services or the baggage handling services. You have to do that. Passengers will not spend more and more of that because those services are just used once, right? So that leaves Heathrow with retail shops and restaurants where the passengers can spend more and more time and money, and that generates more and more revenue for Heathrow. So hence, airports use all sorts of tricks and tactics to increase the passenger spending. Tactics like keeping the terminal gates far away from the exit gates. So in the process, you have no other option but to go through the duty-free retail shops, and that's how you'd stop and buy something from there. Another one is that airports open security gates or terminal gates 45 to 60 minutes before departure, which means that passengers have to wait in the lobby area or spend time in the lounge, again suitable for the airport revenue model. And if more flights are long haul, the passengers are likely to spend more because these passengers have more spending capacity. They're traveling internationally. So compare that to short haul or domestic passengers. Again, long haul flights are much more suited for the airport's revenue model. All in all, running an airport is not easy, but commercial airports do make money and they are profitable. But you can count the number of profitable airports on your fingertips, because if airports were to become profitable, then a certain hard decision needs to be taken, like deterring the short haul flights, right, or the domestic flights. However, that's not in the best interest of passengers in a country. All right, so that's all for today. We also cover fascinating aspects of other businesses as well. If you like this video, you'll definitely like our video on the Costco business model. It talks about how it's a grocery store that charges a subscription. Very interesting. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Vested for more such videos.